Well, good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here in this forum and in this session number 3, that has been dedicated to education and curriculum. So let's go ahead and start right away. The first, um, the first, the first, the first talk that we have is done by Dr. Jian Li, who is a professor at the U.S. Women's University Graduate School of Translation and Interpretation. Just for you to know a little bit about Dr. Li, she received her PhD in linguistics from the Macquarie University in Sydney and taught there before joining the U.S. Women's University in 2010. Her research interests include legal interpreting and translation, community interpreting, interpreter and translator training, and discourse analysis. Her research work has been published in peer-reviewed journals in journals such as Interpreting, Translation, and Interpreting Studies, Applied Linguistics, Multilingual Perspectives, Meta, and International Journal of Speech, Language and Law, and Police Practice and Research. She also authored a few books on legal interpreting and community interpreting, and contributed to the Routledge Handbooks of Conference Interpreting and Interpreting and Routledge University Encyclopedia of Translation Studies. So let's start with this very interesting talk.
Hello, I'm June Lee with Ewha Women's University. Today, my topic is on online police interpreter training. I'd like to first give you an overview of community interpreting services in South Korea. It can be said that it is yet to be professionalized, and there is a lack of formal community interpreter training programs. Generally speaking, community services in South Korea have been moving from ad hoc services toward semi-professional services. The Ministry of Gender Equality and Family has marriage migrant interpreting services, and courts, the Ministry of Justice, and Korean National Police Agency has their own pools of interpreters. And the court and the Ministry of Justice have introduced interpreter tests a few years ago. And today's focus is on the Korean National Police Agency funded short interpreter training courses. There are currently over 3,000 interpreters of 35 languages registered on the National Police Interpreter Registry. They are largely untrained interpreters, and the majority of them are from migrant backgrounds. Unfortunately, there's little or no screening of interpreting skills to work as police interpreters, and they are occasionally or seldom engaged in police interpreting in terms of the frequency of police interpreting. And there's no agency between the interpreters and the police, so investigating officers quite often directly contact interpreters on the registry. Because there's a lack of interpreter training for police interpreters, there's also a lack of trust in the police interpreting quality, which has been documented in the literature. The Korean National Police Agency started a short course for its interpreters in 2017 on a pilot cases, then expanded the training program. Since 2018, over 1,700 trainees completed the training program. The training program used to be one-day on-site training, but it has shifted to online due to the COVID-19 in 2020. The training courses include 3 classes First, theory class on the Korean criminal procedure, focusing on police investigation, and another theory class on the basic principles in police interpreting, and interpreting practice classes in several languages. For interpreting practice training, Chinese, English, Japanese, Mongol, Russian, Thai, and Vietnamese interpreters attend language-specific classes, and for other language interpreters, there have been non-language specific classes. This is an overview of the training programs over the past few years. As you can see, the target number of trainees has increased from 200 in 2018 to 750 in 2020. And the online training program has attracted interpreters from across the nation. The curriculum are basically two-tier courses. In 2019, advanced course was introduced, which was designed for those trainees who had completed the basic course in the previous year. And as you can see, over the years, the training hours have also expanded. And as of 2020, the basic course was duration of 6 hours in total. And in the advanced course, the training hours ran up to 13 hours. And in 2020, post-training interpreting assessment was introduced. Let me speak briefly about the post-training interpreter test. It has been conducted via Zoom after the training was over, and it included one knowledge question on the norms in police interpreting. So the trainee was asked to state about the accuracy in police interpreting or impartiality in police interpreting. And they were also requested to sight translate Korean texts into non-Korean languages. They had to complete 2 tests in sight translation. Following sight translation, they listened to a pre-recorded dialogue interpreting scripts and interpreted in both language directions. And they had 2 sets of short dialogue interpreting tests. The duration was about 20 to 25 minutes in total. Every year, we have conducted surveys in order to gather feedback from trainees. And I'm going to share with you findings from 2018 and 2020 briefly. And I can say it has been resoundingly positive feedback. The majority of trainees were highly satisfied and find the training program very helpful for their practice. And there was no significant difference in terms of their level of satisfaction between in-person training and online training. Here's the outcome. You can see in police investigation, interpreting theory classes, and interpreting practice classes, the satisfaction ran very high. And there wasn't much difference between the on-site training mode and the online training mode. What about trainers' feedback? Trainers' feedback have been collected informally before 2020, and we administered an electronic survey in 2020 for trainers. And according to the interpreter trainers, they found the training program satisfactory, but they had mixed feelings due to the organizational problems and classroom management issues in 2020. Some said they found some classes were too big to manage. For example, in Chinese classes, there were over 60. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about these issues. There was not enough time for preparation on the part of the organizer. So some classes were too big to engage trainees in interpreting practices. And some trainees were unresponsive in the online classes. For some, it was the first online training experiences, and many of them were not accustomed to interpreting practice classes. So sometimes they kept their video off. They were unresponsive because some of them were just attending the class while working at their offices. And some trainees' linguistic skills were lacking. That means that they were not able to engage in interpreting practices required in interpreting classes. These were some of the major issues raised by the trainers. And as for some continuing issues, I can say that the police lack of understanding about interpreter training is a main issue. They often have a short-term perspective, and the person who is in charge of this training program has changed over a few times already. And they seem to be more interested in the results, the outcomes in terms of figures. So they're more interested in the number of trainees who got high scores and the number of trainees rather than the quality of training. And as I said before, there has been too little time for preparation and organization for the best training outcome because police arrange the training at their convenience toward the end of a year. And there has been miscommunication within the police. The funding has come from Korea National Police Agency, whereas the recruitment of trainers were done by local police agencies that actually hire and manage them. And there has been lack of communication and understanding on the part of local police agencies. So sometimes they recruit interpreter trainees and assign them to courses where they don't belong. For example, advanced course is designed for those who have completed the basic course, but the local police agency thought that their interpreters were veteran interpreters, but when they actually come to interpreting class, they turn out to be not competent enough to be engaged in interpreting class activities, which was really sad to some trainers. And that's partly related to the current recruitment practice of the Korean interpreters. And these issues should be handled in order to achieve the best training outcomes in the long run. In conclusion, let me say that collaborative partnership and unhindered communication are essential, especially the cooperation between the stakeholders, such as the police, the training agency commissioned by KNPA to deliver the training, and interpreter trainers. And as I said, police also needs to understand that interpreting skill training is not meaningful for those who lack sufficient bilingual skills. And the training program needs to be tailored to trainees' needs. Some interpreters have formal interpreter training in conference interpreting, and they don't need interpreting practice skills. And some trainees from migrant backgrounds need Korean lessons before they undertake interpreting training. So such needs should be understood by police and also the agency. Online training is expected to remain in the post-COVID era, according to the survey results. They found their online training mode as an effective training method. And we also found that it could reach out to trainees in the regional areas. So it is expected to be effective delivery mode in the post-COVID era because of flexibility and convenience. Of course, there are some disadvantages in terms of student concentration and technical hiccups during classes, but advantages seem to outweigh disadvantages. So it is expected that online training will continue to be available to trainees. And these are references I've used for this presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, that was the conference from Dr. Lee. Now, she was unable to attend today, but if you have any questions, you may send them to the email that is on the chat box right now. That is zhuc@wfu.edu. And Dr. Zhu will be more than glad to give the questions or comments to Dr. Lee, and maybe she will reply to all of you. Now, our second presenter is Dr. Mario Liu, who is
Mariana, may I interrupt? So if any of you have any comments, we do have 1 more minute, quick comments. If you don't, we will move on to the second presenter. Okay, let's move on.
All right, thank you. So for this second conference that we have today, or the second presentation, that it's titled on translation in TCFL with all factors considered, analyzed, and practiced. We will have Dr. Mario Liu from Lewis Clark Lewis Clark College. And let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Liu. She is currently the instructor of Chinese at Lewis and Clark College. She had been a professor of Chinese language and culture at Portland State University from 1996 to 2019. And during her tenure at Portland State University, she organized and co-organized more than a dozen regional, national, and international conferences, forums, seminars, and workshops on generic and business Chinese language teaching and material and cross-cultural communication and translation studies. Also, she specializes in Chinese language teaching and curriculum design, translation, and Chinese cultural studies. She has been teaching Chinese language courses of all levels and Chinese literature in translation at Lewis Clark College. She has also served as director and lead professor of the Oregon Graduate Chinese Language Teacher Professional Development and Training Program from 2008 to 2015, and the director of the Overseas Chinese Flagship Program with American Councils for International Education. She has also been invited as an academic advisor, consultant, and teacher trainer at universities in the United States, Canada, and China, and as a trainer and keynote speaker and presented at local, national, and international conferences and workshops related to teaching Chinese as a foreign language. With no further comments, let's have Dr. Liu with us for this very interesting presentation. Dr. Liu.
Thank you, Maria, for your kind introduction, and thank you, Dr. Zhu and Dr. Chen and other organizers, and especially Xuanmin Luo, my former classmates and friends, for inviting me to give a presentation at this conference. It's my pleasure and honor to be presenting. Let me share my slides just a second. Can everybody, can you see it? Okay, great. Okay, let me see, let me move this, okay. So as Mariana introduced, my topic for today's presentation is on translation in teaching Chinese as a foreign language with all factors considered, analyzed, and practiced. And I hope I will have enough time to finish a long presentation today. And first of all, I would like to talk about the complex role of translation in teaching Chinese as a foreign language. And first of all, is a pedagogical translation versus a professional translation. There are two different concepts. Most of the time in teaching Chinese as a foreign language, and we use the pedagogical translation. So pedagogical translation is for the purpose of foreign language learning and teaching for acquiring linguistic competence. So translation is serving as a tool to help the student improving all aspect of the language, target language they're learning, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, of course, including translating. And it also stop at the level of linguistic competence. So once they have the target and task is accomplished, and we stop the translation, we no further. So translation is a tool to help them improve the language proficiency. And professional translation seeks textual equivalence in meaning. Its purpose is to train translation skills on the basis of linguistic competence. So that is not a concern of using translation as a professional training in teaching Chinese as a foreign language. So here I would like to compare TTP as like a teaching of translation as a basic skill and teaching of translation professional skills. So teaching of translation as a basic skill is regarded as a test of language proficiency. All the purpose is for improving the language proficiency for the learning of the target language, for the learning of the Chinese language. And linguistic competence should be trained in foreign language education. So that's the main purpose. Again, as I said, that translation is the tool to help the student improve their proficiency. It's not main purpose. Linguistic competence is based on training. So we need to train the students from the novice level all the way to the advanced level, superior level, and even distinguished level. And then we use the translation as a tool from the beginning to the end and to help the student reach their target. And then, no language skill is taught in isolation. We cannot just teach the language for language purposes without utilizing any other tools, helping tools to support the teaching and learning of the language or target language. And teachers are supposed to treat a translation in teaching Chinese as a foreign language as, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Supportive means, complementary means, and the testing means of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So that's the purpose of using translation in teaching Chinese as a foreign language for achieving linguistic purpose. And also make listening, speaking, reading, typing, and writing, and including translating in an active interaction state. So this is where we say that nowadays we emphasize, in the past, just teaching a foreign language, we emphasize listening, speaking, reading, and writing, the 4 skills. Now I would like to add listening, speaking, reading, typing, and translating. And translating is the highest level that student can achieve. However, as I mentioned in the next presentation, that we can use translation not only for the advanced level, intermediate level, we can use it from the beginning, a novice level, to help us students improve their language skills. And translation is a meaning transference, yeah. So with the help of the translation, they can transfer the meaning and be able to consolidate what they have studied in a linguistic sense. And meaning is determined by context. You know, if we give a student a phrase and sentence without any context or even a phrase, and you ask the student translate, they can only translate the phrase and sentences. And then the translation without a context may not go anywhere. Yeah, like a very simple example I can think of now, like people in China like to greet each other when they, meet someone in the neighborhood. They say, "Have you eaten yet?" And if you translate this as like a "Have you eaten yet?" 你吃饭了吗? And then some serious person may give a serious answer. No, I haven't eaten yet. No, I have eaten yet, or I'm going to eat. But this is without the context. If with the context, and then people know the cultural background, and people will understand, the student, the learner will understand this is just a simple way of greeting. It's like say hello and hi, and you don't have to respond. It's like a rhetorical question. There's no need to respond. So if you teach the student translate those kind of phrases and individual isolated sentences without context, and this is not a way that as an instructor and the language teacher should focus on. And then content and form and effect are interdependent. Yeah, so interdependent with one another. And also translation is a purposeful activity. Yeah, you do the translation for certain purposes. You want to improve the student listening skills, and you can give them sentences and paragraphs and then text for them to practice speaking fluently in phrases on the basis of word, phrase, and sentences, and paragraphs and text. And that's how we, our language instructor is set the purpose for the activities that they engage in the classroom teaching. And translation forces the student to notice the differences in structure and vocabulary. It's very easy for them to notice the different grammatical structure and use of terms and vocabulary, and then selectively choose the correct words. And then on purpose, the instructor will provide them opportunity to use the vocabulary they have just learned in order to remember and reinforce what they have learned, including grammatical and language points. And develop a method and strategies for dealing with them. That's the task and responsibility of the language, or I say all language instructors. And translation is much more efficient than the communicative method, I would say, which offers the student many opportunities to avoid developing such a method and strategies. And nowadays, in the field of teaching Chinese as foreign language, it's very popular to use communicative skills, and everybody without using communicative skills, and people will thought that this teacher's traditional is outdated. But translations, communication skills is based on accumulation of enough linguistic knowledge and training. And then without, if you don't know anything, you are only at the novice level, and you just learn greetings, and without any more phrases and grammatical vocabulary and grammar structures, how can you communicate with a native speaker? No. But for translation, you can train. You can train even the student just learn a few words. You can start using the translation to help them consolidate and reinforce what they have learned. And they have learned some grammatical structures, and you can simulate more sentences using the same grammatical structure, and then and help the student translate. You can give the student target language and student translate into English. Most of the time, I prefer to give the English language and student translate into the target language. And the best way is to use a language lab. I would remember when I was trained to do simultaneous interpretation at the graduate school, and we use the language lab, and then the instructor will play the real United Nations speech, and then we listen and speak out. But unfortunately, at my college, I don't know if in other universities they have such a kind of sophisticated language lab. So a lot of time the instructor will play what has been pre-recorded, or the instructor just simply provide the improvised translation, have the student translate it back into the target language, or have the student do role play, and one person serving as a native speaker, and then another person serving as an interpreter, and vice versa. And then the instructor need to create an environment, a context for them. It's not as translation and practice for translation and practice purposes. And they need to have a context, tour, cooperation, or sightseeing, or in a visit, or different kinds of situations, even in a different setting and context that will help achieve the purpose of achieving the linguistic task. Another one is teaching translation for professional skills, which is a part of the career plan that focuses on students' translation skill and competence. I don't want to speak too much about this because this is for training the translation major students and in the translation program. And next one is teaching of translation to improve basic linguistic skills. That is the purpose of teaching Chinese as a foreign language. So translation should be applied in language teaching as a learning strategy to comprehend and remember and produce a foreign language and target language that students are learning. And also supportive means. So complementary means and testing means of listening, speaking, reading, writing, and translating. So you can give students a quiz and test and exam. And during the exam, I always like to give a students pre-recorded for listening.
Professor Liu, I'm so sorry, you have only 3 more minutes left.
Okay, I need to hurry up. I have a lot to say. Okay, and there is a distinction between pedagogical translation and the real translation. Here is the function and object of the pedagogical translation. I don't want to repeat, so people can quickly glance. The purpose of the pedagogical translation, and here is the list I have listed. And if you have more to help me enrich, please, by all means, to let me know after my presentation. And the next one is and continue my list for pedagogical translation. And I would like to also, let's see, I'm sorry. I also have real translation. Real translation is here I listed as a translated text. It's not the tool, but the very goal of the process. Information is about the reality retained in the text. And then real translation is targeting language reader, wanting some information about the reality and real world communication skills, and seeking textual equivalent in meaning. So I will also, I included the grammar translation approach versus the state of the art in teaching Chinese as a foreign language, which also including training the student translation skills orally and in writing as well. And then focus of the grammar translation method. And then when we introduce a new grammatical structure, we can use the translation method and to help the student practice this pattern of grammatical language points to reinforce and remember it and know how to do it. And there is also state of the art in teaching Chinese. I don't want to go the pros and cons, and then it's all in the, and then combining translation into teaching Chinese as foreign language. And this is what I have been practicing in Chinese. And then we use translation as a pedagogical means, not for professional training, but for the purpose of achieving the target language learning goals. And we're using translation in teaching Chinese as a foreign language to train the grammar, to train presentation skills and speaking skills and reading skills and writing skills. And then there are several other tools I would like to share if I have time. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time. I'm sorry. So communicative competence, and then pedagogical translation for the purpose of the following purposes, all to achieve the target and goals for teaching Chinese as a foreign language. I don't think I'd like to go further. I don't want to run over time. And I'm welcoming everybody to answer questions if you have any. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Liu, for such an amazing presentation. Now it's time. We have 5 minutes for questions in case that someone would like to answer or make any comments regarding this. Dr. Zhu?
I just have a quick comment. This is fascinating to me because for years I've been trying to teach the undergraduate students how to translate. And ITS is a graduate level program. So everybody in our program is a graduate student. And recently I've been approached by different departments at Wake Forest. They want to start an initiative with the graduate students in terms of how to make better use of the language and cultural skills. And I said, we can teach them how to translate and how to interpret. So Dr. Liu, I will definitely come back to you for more ideas and for all the models you mentioned in your presentation. This is fascinating to me. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Does anyone else have any questions for Dr. Liu? Yes, Jose? Jose?
Mariana, you need to unmute Jose.
Yeah, you need to unmute.
Yes, we cannot hear you, Jose.
See if I can unmute her.
He needs to
unmute him.
unmute.
The host. Okay. Jose, try.
Thank you. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Yes. Yeah, I'm able to. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for your talk. That was really, really interesting.
Thank you.
Because it is something I myself as a Spanish instructor in the US for some years already, it's been something that has been taught in the departments all over the country. It is something that has a lot of people that are behind the idea of including translation into a language instruction. There is a lot of resistance as well in the departments. So my question was about the departmental level of your approach. Because I see that many foreign language departments in the US have difficulties working as teams. And because you have different instructors that come from different generations, that they share different types of skills, they have different backgrounds. Some instructors they have their training in linguistics, some other instructors have their training in literature. So I was wondering, do you have any ideas how can departments can approach developing a new type of curricula that are informed by translation or for teaching translation skills that could fit many different characteristics of the different characteristics of their instructors?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jose, for your question. I know that it's been trained in the field of teaching Chinese as a foreign language, that communication skills, and then people downgrade those days translation skills and grammar translation. They thought it was outdated. But for me, I always feel that translation is a very important and effective tool in teaching Chinese as a foreign language, because my personal preference and also my personal training at graduate school at Beijing Foreign Language Studies University. And then I would say, if you know, in the world language department, foreign language department, people teach different type of languages. You cannot require that all instructors to use a translation method to teach the courses. So first of all, maybe some teachers, they're limited in the maybe English language or Spanish language and whatever native language, and they may not be comfortably easily change from one language to another. So if they don't feel comfortable, and we're not supposed to force them to use the method. And another way to promote translation method in incorporating teaching a target language is to like a training session. And you can, if you are a department head, I would organize all the teachers to like observe a class in which an instructor is using translation skills, translation method, and then to observe how effectively and this method is used in helping the student improving their proficiency in the shortest possible time. I think that is the method. You can promote it this way instead of force everybody to use the method. I know some people feel comfortable using it. I do, very comfortable, even at the beginning level, day one. And then other people don't feel comfortable. And some people cannot even handle teaching the language at the advanced, distinguished, and superior level. And then some people cannot handle it. And if teacher cannot do it, then their language skill, the language level is not high enough. How can the teacher expect the student to achieve that level? That's what my personal view. I hope.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. I think it was very clear. Thank you very much for your presentation and for the answering of the questions. Due to time limit, now we will have to move to the third presenter. But thank you, Dr. Liu, for your amazing presentation. And if any one of you have more questions, you can contact Dr. Liu, or you can send an email to thehuc@wfu.edu, and then we will be glad to forward any questions to Dr. Liu. Thank you again.
Please do. Yeah, please do, and we can communicate offline after the conference. Thank you so much, Mariana. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, our third presenter, it's Longyu Zhu, who is a candidate at PhD candidate at Kent State University, and her research interest is in machine translation and cognitive psycholinguistics. And she is here to present her talk about patterns of attention in simultaneous interpreting with text and impact on translation quality. Longyu.
Thank you for the introduction, Mariana.
You're welcome.
Share my screen.
Thank you.
Oh, can you see my screen?
Yes, we do. Thank you very much.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Longhui Zhou, and I'm from Kent State University. And today I'm presenting our paper entitled Patterns of Attention in Simultaneous Interpreting with Text, Impact on Translation Quality. So in this research, we want to address 3 questions. First, what is the role of visual attention in simultaneous interpreting with text? Does this visual input predict or verify the oral input, or they serve as independent inputs? And second, how do professional interpreters vary in their attention patterns? And the third question is, how do different attention patterns affect translation quality of simultaneous interpreting with text? The experimental design of the simultaneous interpreting with text task is shown in the figure on this slide. During the experiment, a participant had 2 input sources in parallel. That is 6 consecutive sections from a political speech and the transcriptions of these 6 sections of audio recording. Every participant simultaneously interpreted 6 texts by reading the written English source text and hearing the audio English source text and speaking the oral Chinese target text at the same time. The participants of the audio, the participant listened to the audio and read the transcription of the audio recording, and the transcriptions of the audio recording were displayed in Translog 2 and the interpreter's eye movement data were recorded with a Tobii TX300 eye tracker, whereas the audio input of the speech was replayed by a headset, and the audio recordings of the interpreter's simultaneous interpreting with text were collected together with the original speech by Audacity. We use IMBST18 and IMBI18 datasets available at TPRDB to do our analysis for this research. There are datasets for simultaneous interpreting with text, experiment from English into Chinese, and we hired 9 professional interpreters to do the experiment. And the source text is from highest ranking political speech. And we use 6 source texts with 871 words, and the interpreters produced altogether 202 segments. We also hired 3 annotators to use 6 MQM adapted error types, namely any, accuracy, fluency, style, critical, and minor error types, to annotate manually the errors produced by the interpreters. And as we have mentioned in the last slide, we use Translog 2, Tobii TX300, and Audacity to collect our data. So for our first research question, what is the role of visual attention in simultaneously interpreting with text? We saw a general tendency that ear leads eye, as we illustrate here in this example. The orange circles are the oral input, and the blue circles are the visual input. We see that always ear leads eye. So that means like the oral input is always leading like in front or ahead of the visual input for almost all the participants. And for the research question 2, how do professional interpreters vary in their attention patterns? We, according to our observations of our data set, we see 3 types of interpreters. The first type is, we call it ear dominant interpreter, as examples of P01, P02, P03, and P07. We also see from the example from P01, the orange circle is also the oral input. The blue circle is indicating the visual input, and the square is indicating the oral output. We see that for ear dominant interpreters, the oral output and the oral input are more attached to each other instead of the visual input and the oral output. So we call them ear dominant interpreters. For the second type of the interpreters, we call them eye dominant interpreters. For the examples, as the examples of P05 and P06. We also see from the example we illustrate here for P05, the orange circles also means oral input, and the blue circles means visual input. We can see the square is the oral output. We can see for eye dominant interpreters, we can see the oral output attached more with the visual input instead of the oral input. So we call this type of interpreters eye dominant interpreters. And the third type of interpreter, we call them eye ear balance interpreters. It's the same example as we illustrate here. They are P04, P08, and P09. We call them eye ear balance interpreters, because as we can see, for this kind of interpreters, the oral output of their interpreting products attached to both the ear input and the eye input. So we call them eye ear balance interpreters. So here comes our third research questions. How do this kind of different attention patterns affect translation quality of simultaneous interpreting with text? We hired 3 professional translators to annotate the output of their simultaneous interpreting with text task. Each one annotated 202 segments based on an MQM adapted error taxonomy, as we have mentioned before. It's also shown in the slides here on the left side, including 6 subtypes such as any, accuracy, fluency, style, critical, and minor errors. Different types of errors are coded by different colors. For example, purple indicates accuracy errors, green indicates fluency errors, pink indicates style errors. Within the same color code, the darker shade indicates critical errors, while the lighter shade indicates minor errors. And we can see from our example here is for the same source text and target text. The upper side of this slide is for annotator A, and the bottom side is for annotator B. They annotate very differently for the same source text and target text. As we can see from our example, the source text is our shared interest in peace and security in our region, and beyond makes us natural partners. We see annotator A annotate 4 errors, and first is our into we. The annotator A annotated as a fluency major error, and the second one is and beyond. They annotated as omission error, and the natural because the interpreter rendered natural into such. So this annotator annotated as a major accuracy error. This, so for the same source text and target text, the annotator B think very differently. This is our example for the annotator interface on Java in TPRDB. We use MQM derived error by segment to see for different types of interpreters. We say there are 3 types of interpreters: I dominant, ear dominant, or I ear balanced interpreters. We see that.
Long you have like 3 more minutes.
Okay, yes, thank you. So we see that from our result, this I dominant interpreters, they perform the best among the 3 types of interpreters, and ear dominant interpreters, they're followed by the I dominant person, and the third, the least performed interpreters are the I ear balanced interpreters. We also use automatic assessment tool, BLA, to assess the interpreting quality. So from the BLA result, we can also see the same result. The I dominant person, they perform the best, and the ear dominant person perform the second, and the I ear balanced person perform the least well. So here are our references, and thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such a nice and detailed presentation. We have time only for 1 question. Does anyone have any comment or question? All right. Dr. Zhu, please go ahead.
Okay. All right. Hey, Longhui, welcome back.
Thank you.
It's very interesting. So I'm still thinking about Dr. Liu's presentation while I'm listening to your presentation, because I think these 2 can be combined in a very interesting way.
That's good.
When it comes to teaching interpreting what might be the applications for your research for those? Because I know some of them will be ear dominant interpreters, eye dominant interpreters, and balanced interpreters. Like, how can we apply all these findings into our interpreting teaching?
Oh, so for our research, we're thinking there. This is very interesting that interpreters, they have different personalities. For example, we call it interpreting styles. So basically, most of the time in simultaneous interpreting tasks, they only have one channel to get the input. But we're thinking if they have several channels, then what would they concentrate more? Which channel they concentrate more? And then from my observation, some of the interpreters, I think because some of them are actually graduate students from Renmin University, they first try to focus on both channels, but after a while they tend to just concentrate on one. I think that would increase their performance. That's my assumption. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have another question from Dr. Fasola in the chat. It says, is the conclusion that simultaneous interpreters should ideally work with a written version and be eye dominant?
I think it's each person have different attention patterns. If you are eye dominant, you best just focus on eye input. If you are ear dominant person, you best just focus on ear. That's my assumption. It's like multitasking is a little bit overloading for your cognitive. So I think it's best to focus on one channel.
Well, thank you very much. We have reached the end of our session today. I would like to thank the 3 presenters, and I would also like to thank all of you for being here, and remind you that tomorrow we start at 8:30 a.m. So we will see
And
you
also,
tomorrow.
yes, Mariana, sorry. And also the session 4, it's still on. If you have time, you're welcome to join them. And they will end in 1:45, I believe. It's another very interesting topic about a poem, poetry translation.
All right. Thank you, all of you, and we will see each other tomorrow.
Oh, we have one more question from Blin. And can this be introduced to the interaction between interpreters and other visual signals? Longhui, I think that's for you too.
Oh. Yeah, I think it's depending on your personality. Yeah, characteristics. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, okay, I will forward your personality characteristics. Okay.
Thank you.
you. All right. I will forward your answer to that person. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to see you again, Dr. Zhu. Bye.
All right. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you, Mariana.
Thank you.